What is true health? Who doesn't want to be happy and healthy? Well, at least as happy and healthy as you can be. Today we're going to be talking about true health on this edition of Ask Dr. Walt.
Today, our health includes our mind, our body, and our spirit. Separating medical facts from fiction is the key that leads to wise decisions about our health and well-being. Unpacking the latest research is vital. Doing what works helps us live our best lives today. How can we live longer? How can we live healthier? Let's ask Dr. Walt on Liftable TV.
Hi everyone, I'm family physician Dr. Walt Larimore, and I'm delighted you're taking the time to join me in my office today. Since our last visit, we've received a number of questions from you, and the one I selected for today's program came from Maria in Gulfport, Mississippi. She emailed me, as each of you can, at drwalt@liftable.tv. She wrote this: Dr. Walt, in several episodes, you've talked about how we can each be healthier. My question is, how do you define true health? I found that my pastor, my doctor, and my therapist all have different definitions. Which one is yours? Maria, this is a great question. It's so important that I want to spend most of our time today chatting about what constitutes true health. In one of my best-selling books, 10 Essentials of Happy, Healthy People, I outline 10 key habits of people who are very healthy. The first one is this: the essential of true health. Understand how physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual health work together. Here's the next 9. Number 2, the essential of self-care, how to be proactive in preventing disease. 3, the essential of forgiveness, how to practice acceptance and letting go. Number 4, the essential of reducing sadness. The SAD is for stress, anxiety, and depression, how to lighten your load. 5, the essential of relationships, how to avoid loneliness like the plague. 6, the essential of spiritual well-being, how to cultivate what I call a positive spirituality. 7, the essential of a positive self-image, how to see yourself as your Creator sees you. 8, the essential of discovering your destiny, how to nurture your hopes and dreams. 9, the essential of personal responsibility and empowerment, how to become your own healthcare quarterback. And 10, the essential of teamwork in healthcare, how to team up with winning healthcare professionals. Maria, we'll start with essential number 1 in this program, and then I'd like to plan to discuss each of the remaining 9 in our next 9 programs. But let me start by telling you a story from when I began in private practice. I received a call from a young lady who began, Dr. Larimore, this is Miss Bingham. I teach the 2nd grade at Bryson City Elementary School over here on Schoolhouse Hill. Now, I was learning that every hill in Bryson City, North Carolina was named in this manner. My office was at the top of Hospital Hill. Anyway, it was November 1981. My wife, Barb, who was 7 months pregnant, and I, along with our 3-year-old daughter, Kate, had just moved to this tiny town of about 900 souls at the southern entrance to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park to begin my profession as a family doc. Well, Miss Bingham said, every Thursday we invite someone to give a brief talk to our class. Would you be able to come and talk to the students about health? You know, tell the kids what health is and what they can do to improve their health. I got to tell you, she caught me off guard. I mean, I immediately thought of 1,000 excuses, but before I could verbalize even one of them, she said, Doc, I think the kids would really like to meet you, and I know that they could learn a lot from you. Won't you please come? Well, I was sunk. I mean, what excuse would be good enough? So, yes, I gulped. I'll be delighted. My mind started reeling. I mean, how could I explain to a bunch of 2nd graders what health is when I wasn't even sure in my own mind what it was? I mean, during medical school and residency, I had been taught to recognize and treat diseases. I had had very little training in keeping people healthy, and even less on how to motivate people to become healthy. Well, I've got to tell you, I've never forgotten that day. And although I don't have a clue what I said to those kids in my talk, I do remember that they listened politely and they even clapped. They asked lots of questions. I think I knew the answer, but Even now, more than 40 years later, I wonder what they heard. Are they healthier because of their brief time with me? I doubt it, but I am. Because on that day, I began to think more about ways that I could promote health, not just treat sickness. I realized I needed to learn more so I could help people gain health and satisfaction in their lives. Many of the people who came to me for medical care were not very healthy. I'll tell you about one of my favorite examples of being unhealthy. It comes from the movie City Slickers. In the scene where Mitch Robbins, played by comedian Billy Crystal, is asked to make a presentation to his son's class about his occupation. Instead, he gives a brief speech that describes his view of life and health.
Value this time in your life, kids. Because this is the time in your life when you still have your choices. And it goes by so fast. When you're a teenager, you think you can do anything, and you do. Your 20s are a blur. 30s, you raise your family, you make a little money, and you think to yourself, what happened to my 20s? 40s, you grow a little pot belly, you grow another chin. The music starts to get too loud. One of your old girlfriends from high school becomes a grandmother. 50s, you have a minor surgery. You'll call it a procedure, but it's a surgery. 60s, you'll have a major surgery. The music is still loud, but it doesn't matter because you can't hear it anyway. The 70s, you and the wife retire to Fort Lauderdale. Start eating dinner at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You have lunch around 10, breakfast the night before. Spend most of your time wandering around malls looking for the ultimate soft yogurt and muttering, how come the kids don't call? How come the kids don't call? The 80s, you'll have a major stroke. You end up babbling to some Jamaican nurse who your wife can't stand, but who you call mama. Any questions?
I hope the kids in my class weren't quite as bored as those kids. But can you imagine such a cynical view of life, of health? Yet over the past 4 decades, I've encountered many patients who seem to think pretty much this way. In contrast, the patients who have expanded my understanding of health are those who they're vivacious and full of life and who want to become and stay highly healthy. These folks seem to live their lives with purpose, with drive, with meaning, regardless of their circumstances. My patients through the last 4 decades in the medical literature have taught me that true health is far more than just physical. As we discussed in another program, there are 4 wheels of true health that each must remain fully inflated and balanced, and those are your physical health, your emotional mental health, healthy relationships, and spiritual health. One patient of mine who illustrated this was Terry. She was an elementary school librarian. I was a physician for almost 16 years, from her midlife through menopause and on into retirement. During that time, she developed symptoms of diabetes and heart disease. Crippling arthritis slowed her down. Yet she always seemed to be at the top of her game. She had this joie de vivre, an enjoyment of life. Now, she was physically ill, but extremely healthy emotionally, spiritually, as well as having close and healthy relationships with her family, friends, and faith community. If you were to focus only on her list of physical problems, you'd say she had lost her health. Yet I came to realize that Terry was one of my healthiest patients, and she was the first of my patients who became my teachers in what it means to experience true health. Not just disease and symptom-free, but whole health in the most important ways. Now, is physical health all there is to health? I mean, if you're just in great physical shape, does that make you healthy by itself? I don't think so. And I hope by the end of today's show, you won't think so either. Let me illustrate it for you with a patient I'll call Cameron. He was hyper-focused on his physical health. In fact, he finished several Ironman triathlons, an amazing physical accomplishment. He was in top physical condition physically, disease-free, yet struggling with severe depression. He focused so completely on physical fitness that essentially he had no friends. He had no social life. His wife and kids left him. His business collapsed. Was it healthy for him to be in his physical prime, yet unable to care about much of anything emotionally or relationally? Let me give you another example. For a time, I provided medical care for prisoners in the county jail. Many had bodies that were highly healthy, Yet a few described the sick pleasure they had while beating or robbing or even murdering someone. Some of them were totally unrepentant, and I was convinced that if they ever got out, they'd commit another crime. I mean, these guys and gals had disease-free bodies, but were they completely healthy? I don't think so. But my training in conventional medicine initially led me to emphasize the physical side of health, particularly the treatment of trauma and illness. I viewed patients as healthy if they were free from diseases and injuries. But the more experience I gained, the more I could see that having a physically functioning body is not all important. I don't think it's even the main factor in being highly healthy. So what then is the connection between physical well-being and true health? Well, before I tell you about some steps to achieve this goal, let's be sure we've defined the goal. What is true health? This is Maria's question. So let's look at 3 sources and compare their definitions. First, the conclusions of healthcare providers around the world. Second, a few definitions from through history. And finally, third, the definition provided by the World Health Organization, a group that has influenced healthcare around the world since 1948. So number 1, current health professionals. So in preparing to write my book, 10 Essentials of Happy, Healthy People, I informally surveyed more than 1,000 physicians and healthcare experts in many different countries. I asked them 2 questions. Number 1, what is health? And number 2, what are the essentials of health? After cataloging their surprising responses, I began to search the medical literature from around the world. I reviewed scores of studies and medical reports, many of which I'll refer to in upcoming shows. I especially examined studies that focused on wellness and longevity. I looked at the histories of men and women who had lived a long time and who lived well in order to discover what kept them in this state of being highly healthy. Their stories and the data I cataloged all revolved around the same themes. The experts and the published studies agreed that living well and living a long time involves focusing not just on your physical body, but also your emotional, mental, relational, and spiritual well-being. Well, here are some of the historic definitions of health. In medical libraries, there's a great deal of information on how ancient physicians, philosophers, and clergy defined health. I've noticed certain trends in writings that go back many centuries. Our word health is said to be derived from an Old English word that means whole. The definition of health is intended to include those things that make a person whole. Obviously, this means much more than just physical well-being. For example, some ancient writers taught that satisfying work, or a vocation that brings joy, is compatible with improving health, as long as you loved your work and can do it with enthusiasm. They also believed that work that is depressing, or a downer, to use a modern term, could actually steal from your health. 18th century authors and theologians taught that a calm temperament, emotional health, combined with a tranquil spirit, spiritual health, was a key to true health. Many associated health with a good sense of humor and an ability to laugh at oneself. In their attempt to define health, some ancient philosophers and physicians pointed to the Greek word praus, which means gentle or meek, as a key to health. For example, according to Aristotle, praus had to do with one's ability to temper or avoid feelings of anger or bitterness, what he called thymos. And by that he meant a force that boils up or wells up or goes up in smoke. To the ancient Greeks, this quality called praus was one's ability to acquire an even temperament and to be mentally and emotionally healthy. Praus, the Greeks claimed, helped create good health. Do you see from all this that the physicians and philosophers and clerics for centuries have believed that to have true health, you need much more than physical health alone. Healthy work, positive relationships, mental and emotional health, all combined with spiritual well-being, all contribute to true health. Now, the World Health Organization's definition of health began in 1948. Their modern definition of health was that it was included in their constitution. And it said that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. But they updated that. In 1984, the WHO added spirituality to its list of factors that are necessary for optimum health. And they now say health is a state of complete physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. You see, the WHO definition was, at least in part, created as a reaction against certain modern definitions of health that neglected emotional health or social health or spiritual health factors as being associated with human well-being. And I think the WHO definition of health is on target. In fact, a doctor who practices in an inner city neighborhood articulates my perspective of health when she wrote me this. She said, "I think that true health involves our entire beings. The physical, mental, and spiritual elements must all be functioning as God designed them to function if we're to be truly healthy. The physical may actually be the most unimportant of the three, because with good mental and spiritual health, we can still be content, even though our bodies may be unhealthy." In other words, I think of it this way. Spiritual health is the power wheel of health. So I have a rather bold suggestion I want to make to you. I'm going to recommend that in addition to paying attention to thousands of medical studies, current medical advice, and historical medical wisdom, that we all also consider a book with proven, timeless principles that can be applied in any culture at any time. It's a book I use to teach my patients the essentials they need to know in order to become healthy. Now, millions around the world refer to this as the good book, and that book is the Bible. You gotta be kidding me, Dr. Walt. You may be thinking, how can a book that is thousands of years old be of any use in our era of science and modern medicine? Well, I hope you can accept the idea that to be healthy, you have to think way beyond your body. And looking at what the good book has to say about health can give us some clues as to what makes up a high degree of overall health. Now, look, you know, and I admit I'm not a trained theologian, but I've been a student of the Bible for over 40 years, and I'm familiar with many of its precepts and principles. And I have become convinced that this ancient book of wisdom contains timeless principles of health that are supported by reams of scientific research. So let's just take a few minutes to take a brief look at what the Bible says about health and healing. Now, the teaching of the Bible and the miracles of Jesus show that God cares for people's physical health. I think one of the best known examples of biblical love is the story of the Good Samaritan. It's found in Luke chapter 10, verses 30 to 37. The Good Samaritan cared for an injured man, but not just physically. He cared for the injured man holistically, including his relational and financial needs. First, the Good Samaritan bandaged the man's wound, poured on oil and wine on him, and then he took him to a place where the man could recover physically. The Bible teaches that God values our physical bodies. He considers our bodies to be the temple, the dwelling place of His Holy Spirit. Paul mentions that physical training has value. God is concerned about our physical health. But in the Bible, health is viewed as far more than just physical health. It's viewed as completeness, as wholeness, as holiness. In his book, The Bible and Healing, John Wilkinson, he's a British physician who was both a medical missionary and a biblical scholar, he writes this: While the Bible appears to say little about health as defined in strictly medical or mental terms, human wholeness or health is the main topic of the Bible. It's only when human beings are whole and their relationships right that they can be described as truly healthy. I really like that. In other words, health in the Bible is a multifaceted concept. Let me just give you a few examples. The Hebrew word shalom while sometimes meaning peace, is not just the absence of conflict, just as health is not just the absence of disease. The root meaning of the word shalom is that of wholeness, completeness, and general well-being, not just physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. It also carries a strong emphasis on relational well-being, especially with regard to one's relationship with God. In fact, the Bible teaches that true shalom comes only from God. The Bible teaches the Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace, with shalom. In other words, the Bible teaches that one cannot be healthy physically, emotionally, and relationally unless one is also growing spiritually. Also, in the ancient Hebrew scriptures, we find the word Rapha, which more than any other, I think, describes the process of healing. The various forms of this word occur at least 86 times in the Bible's Old Testament. The variety of uses of Rapha tell us that God's activity as healer is not limited to the physical realm. He's depicted as wanting to restore every aspect of our life, including the mental, emotional, the social, relational, and especially the spiritual. Now, some of the Old Testament laws reflect God's concerns for the health of his people and how he expected them to use natural means to promote health. For example, obeying some of these laws would have promoted health in the same way that public health regulations do today. For example, Israelites were forbidden from eating meat that we now know was more likely to carry disease. They were to quarantine people with possible signs of infectious diseases, just as we use certain isolation techniques today to prevent the spread of infection, like we did during the 2020 COVID pandemic. The clear teaching of the Old Testament is that good health depends on living one's life according to God's will. And this produces what the Hebrew scriptures call tzedek, which means righteousness, or being in a right relationship with God. This leads to a longer, healthier life. King Solomon, said to be the wisest man in the world, connected emotions to physical health when he wrote this: "A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." See that connection? King David poignantly described how guilt over wrongdoing affects physical, spiritual, and emotional health. After committing adultery and murder, David wrote this: "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer." Can you hear his guilt? Can you hear his depression? This multidimensional description of health is carried into the New Testament. Let me just give you a couple examples. The Apostle John links our overall well-being to our spiritual vitality. He wrote this: "Dear friend, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well." Well, enough of the theology. My main point here is that true health, whole health, total health is a major topic in the Bible, and it's viewed primarily as the restoration and strengthening of your personal relationship with God. It's also viewed as a healthy lifestyle, physically and emotionally, that focuses on pursuing healthy relationships with your family and with other people. To my way of thinking, the biblical view of health can be summed up with the word blessed. In fact, blessedness is both a theme in the Old Testament and it's also clearly described in the New Testament. And I think perhaps this is most clearly seen in Jesus' teaching that's called the Sermon on the Mount. But from the beginning to the end, the Bible makes the bold assertion that those who choose to follow the God of the Bible, even when they're not socially, financially, physically, or mentally gifted, can and will be blessed by God, not rejected by Him. And as a result, their overall health is enhanced. So to sum up today's show, I hope that I've opened up your heart and your mind to the fact that your overall health depends not just on your physical health, as important as that is, but also your inner life, emotionally and spiritually, as well as your relationships. Your Creator has divinely designed you in such a way that that if you're willing to concentrate some effort and to follow his principles and guidance, he'll walk with you to nourish and improve your emotional health, your relational health, and your spiritual health, irrespective of your physical health. Now, why am I stressing this timeless biblical view? Does it really matter in the 21st century? I believe from the bottom of my heart that it does. I've had many patients who were physically healthy, yet were social, emotional, and spiritual disasters, unable to grasp what it means to be highly healthy. And I've had patients who have suffered trauma, disease leading to chronic disability or chronic pain or chronic fatigue, who suffer daily in ways that most of us can't begin to imagine. And yet they've developed strategies for experiencing true health. I've also had patients, and Barb and I have had a daughter who lived with profound permanent disabilities from a birth defect or congenital disease, whose prayers for physical healing have not been answered, but whose prayers for true healing have been answered in ways that they never would have imagined. From all of this, I've come to believe that being healthy, truly healthy, is not dependent on physical well-being alone. Being healthy means being healthy in every area of your life, during every stage of your life. It means being balanced in these areas: body, mind, spirit, and community. What in one of our earlier shows I called the 4 wheels of health. By balancing these aspects of health, you can become blessed and thus healthy. Well, even though I've introduced you to the 4 wheels of health, physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual, it's my belief that the wheel connected to the power steering is the spiritual wheel. My proof for that is where the Apostle Paul wrote in 1 Timothy 4:8, "For physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise both for the present life and for the life to come." For me, centering spiritual faith on following Jesus has innumerable benefits. But fundamentally and most importantly, it restores a person's relationship with God, this personal relationship with your Creator. And this is healing in the ultimate sense. But Jesus did not come just to bring spiritual healing. The health he offers should impact every aspect of our lives and our families. It allows relational, emotional, and psychological healing. To those who receive him, God promises spiritual reconciliation for us to become his children, children of God, to be spiritually reborn, to be able to relate intimately with him. And he also promises each of us complete, ultimate healing, physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, in heaven. Healing of all our other illnesses and damage is not promised in this life, but it will occur eventually in the afterlife. Here on earth, this life, Jesus declared that he came to offer health to people in the form of a life on earth that would be full and satisfying, meaningful, coupled with the promise of an eternal life that's disease-free, sin-free, and tear-free. I like how Jesus said it. He said, "I've come that you may have life and have it to the full, that it would be abundant and satisfying." I believe Christ's followers should be real and shining examples of such contented living. In other words, think of it this way. Faith in God can be the beginning of a new way of living and a pathway to true health. Walking closely with God can result in a life that's filled with what's called the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Such contentment is promised regardless of our circumstances, whether we're rich or poor, in sickness or in health. A life characterized by these features is the opposite of a high-stress, discontent rat race that many find themselves in. Folks, this is my belief, that a life built on truth, on the teachings of Jesus, will unleash the true power of faith and true health, despite our circumstances, despite our suffering, despite our diseases. The Apostle Paul advised those of us who follow Jesus to be very careful then in how you live. not as unwise, but as wise. So let me show you a roadmap for our next 9 shows. Are you ready for a few surprises? I'm going to share with you many practical and reasonable choices that you can make to improve your and your family's true health, physically, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. I'll be revealing to you some of the latest medical research on true health, as well as the stories and experiences of my patients and some of my physician friends to illustrate each principle. And as you can tell, I'll unashamedly use the health-related principles from the good book, the Bible, as one of our foundations. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the program, through my research writing as well as my experience in life and 4 decades of medical practice, I found 10 principles that I believe are essential to true health. Now, at first glance, you may suspect that some of these essentials won't have much impact on your true health, but you're about to discover otherwise. Today, we looked at what true health is, the essential of understanding how physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual health work together. And in our future episodes, I'd like to address at least 9 additional essentials. And here's where you come in. I'd like you guys to let me know which of these are of most interest to you. So just drop me a line, drop me an email at drwalt@liftable.tv and let me know your first choice. Of course, you can send in any other questions that you would like me to address in future programs also. So are you ready? Got your pen and pencil ready? Here are the other essentials to choose from. So today we covered number 1, the essential of true health, understanding how physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual health work together. So which of these would you like me to cover next? The essential of self-care, how to be proactive in preventing disease, or the essential of forgiveness, how to practice acceptance and letting go, or the essential of reducing sadness, the SAD standing for stress, anxiety, depression, how to lighten your load. Number 5, the essential of relationships, how to avoid loneliness like the plague. Number 6, the essential of spiritual well-being, of cultivating what I call a positive spirituality. Number 7, the essential of positive self-image. How do you see yourself the way your Creator sees you? Number 8, the essential of discovering your destiny, how to nurture your hopes and your dreams. 9 is the essential of personal responsibility and empowerment, how to become your own healthcare quarterback, your own Peyton Manning or Aaron Rodgers. And then number 10, the essential of teamwork in healthcare, how to team up with winning healthcare professionals. Now, if you want, you can read more about these 10 essentials in 2 books that you can find on my website, drwalt.com. One is Fit Over 50, Making Simple Choices for a Healthier, Happier You. Now, it says Fit Over 50, but anybody of any age can benefit from these principles. And the other book is 10 Essentials of Happy, Healthy People, Becoming and Staying Highly Healthy. Now, I believe these essentials are divinely designed. They're programmed into the very core of our beings, each of us. I believe these essentials are divinely designed. They're programmed into our very core. And if you understand them, if you learn to apply them in your life, you'll be taking the first steps to experiencing true health. Health to improve and lengthen your life now, and that it can provide not only benefit in this life, but eternal life as a benefit. Who doesn't want that? Putting into practice these essentials that I'll be explaining to you as well, it's essential to true health. So now, don't forget to vote on our next program. So until our next visit, let's get moving together toward true health. And dear friends, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. See you next time.